Let me quickly introduce you guys to the panel. Okay, we've got Suchi Mukherjee, who's the CEO of LimeRoad. Welcome, Suchi. We've got Rashmi Chadha, founder of WoVoyage. Welcome. And we have Poonam, who's the EVP, Vodafone India for their digital business. Just setting some introduction to the setting some context to how things are. We've seen that the Indian apps have grown 200%, and consumer spends have increased 85%. Right? These are some of the stats that are showing in 2021 over 2019. In addition to that, what we saw was the app users for Indian apps globally was over 150%. They were spending over 150% of their time on Indian apps. And with that came a lot of the mobile literacy piece. India has about over 750 million smartphones where we are, and growing. Lot of, Poonam, you would agree to the fact that we have the lowest data charges globally. And all of this, and with cheap handsets, and all of this has led to a huge sort of explosion on the mobile side. And all of this growth has come beyond the metropolitan regions. So to address that piece, and also from an AppsFlyer perspective, we've seen that 75% of the non-organic installs in India have happened from these regions, beyond the metropolitan regions. To address this diversity agenda, okay, in the Indian app ecosystem, we have brought together some of the smartest leaders, and I will break in straight away into the icebreakers question. Quickly, your names and 3 words that describe you best.
Poonam Bhatt, 3 words, I think driven, adventurous, and energetic.
Wow. Nice.
I'm Suchi Mukherjee. Grit, and grit.
Awesome, and we need that. Super. Rashmi.
Hi, Rashmi Chadha, and I'm a wanderer, keep traveling, adventurous, and actually quite confident about doing anything. So, yeah.
Super. Welcome, ladies. Welcome to the panel. And with that, let's dive into the questions. So typically, we are here to address diversity, right? And we, living in India, are seeing a lot of diversity from a perspective of the geo-diversification piece, whether it's vernacular content or all the cultural nuances, that come with it. So my first question to you, Rashmi, is that with such massive differences, okay, what do you think has been the most challenging problem? And when it comes to the whole geo-diversification piece within India, and how has it impacted your decision making in terms of for your business?
I want to take you back about WoVoyage. So WoVoyage started as a travel company, and COVID hit, so travel was in worst condition. We started another vertical, which is WoVoyage Media. So I'll just talk about my client, about one of the biggest travel platform, Yatra.com. So in last 2 years, we have transformed Yatra.com, focusing on these, segments, whether it's, talking about marketing or focusing on these segments. It's very, very important in, last couple of years, because let's come on, for example, platforms like Daily Hunt, Moj. When TikTok closed down, everyone is coming and is scrolling down on these platforms. Big retailers and technology platforms, they start marketing using these apps because they want to reach out to these tier 2 and tier 3 audiences. So there were a lot of challenges because especially is one about language. We use in India a lot of vernacular, right? Everyone don't understand only English or Hindi. So few clients about WoVoyage Media, we also told them that why don't we work on emotions when there is no language, but then like in Japan, there is another like client in Japan we work with, they use a lot of emojis. So of course, Japanese still want to use apps which in Japanese. They don't understand much of English. So of course we can learn from these countries how they are handling it, their clientele, and we can put in. That's what we are doing actually. So we are just learning and putting it forward. Yeah.
That's great. And the good part is that you actually took, you started a travel portal while you were working slowly on it, but you actually took advantage and you changed it into a opportunity in terms of where you felt travel was hit. You actually became a social media enabler, yeah, which is absolutely, and you're working with vernacular content, and I am going to touch upon that as well as we go along. Suchi, coming to you, considering LimeRoad, how has it, what are the challenges you faced from a perspective of, from the e-commerce side of things?
The challenges have changed over time. So I remember when I first came back from London and I came here, I realized that I live in Gurgaon. And how many of you live in a metro city? Just raise your hands. Effectively, whatever, 60%, and maybe the remaining 40 are sleeping or not raising their hands, or maybe they are not metro. But is it 60% metro, right? How many of you have had data connectivity issues inside your flat? Raise your hands. Absolutely. And can you imagine we talk about Bharat, but the first thing was, how does Bharat even get connected? If Airtel can't get this thing right in the heart of Gurgaon, how is Bharat getting it right? Okay. So the challenge number one was, Bharat connectivity must be suckier than Gurgaon. And so we started traveling and we found two things. One is, yes, connectivity has intermittency. And what is intermittency? Intermittency is you're browsing an app, the internet connection drops, you get an error, and then you forget about the app. It's the biggest retention disaster for somebody who's just gone and spent $20 with Facebook to download you, right? So that is intermittency one. Second type of intermittency we found, and LimeRoad is a platform that has, for those of you who don't know, has served 17 million buyers across India. We're in the value fashion space, right? Now, our value fashion customer is this woman, right? Tier 2 woman. And she switches on the Wi-Fi in the middle of the day after she has done her household chores. So her Wi-Fi timing is a very set period. Or she's sneaking into her husband's so-called office and then using the Wi-Fi there. So Wi-Fi periods are set, and there's intermittency. So challenge number one was intermittency and limited access, limited from a constraint perspective. So we said we have to have the lightest app in the country, and we have to have the fastest web pages. Today, if you put LimeRoad's web page against anybody in the country, any third-party test, we have the fastest load time. And that load time was very important. Second was we have the lightest app. Relative to any e-commerce in this country, with the lightest app, it's sub 10 MB, I think even today it will be sub 10 MB. And it doesn't explode when you download it. In the early days, it was sub 5 MB, okay? And we had a very image-heavy platform. So the first thing was, how do you use technology to solve for intermittency was challenge number one. Today, the challenges are different, right? You're going to talk about 5G, etc. But today, the challenges those are still there. But today, the challenges are stuff like PIN code. Now, if you open Bharat to e-commerce, or Bharat opens up to e-commerce, you get addresses like, पेड़ के पास मंदिर है, वहाँ भेज देना. So the address field says Mandir. Okay. There is no PIN code. I live in the heart of Gurgaon, literally the heart of Gurgaon. My husband uses PIN code 12001. I use pin code 12007. My staff living above my house uses pin code 12003. All of us get everything delivered. This is in the heart of Gurgaon. Address is a huge issue. And we've used Google Enterprise APIs, etc., etc. So the challenges today are much more ground level. And they're much more operational. They're grittier. They are about how do you record an ad address and stuff like that. And we'll talk a little bit more. But I want to pass on to you. But there are lots of lovely stories like that on challenges, and how you can solve for these is really quite interesting.
It's a great segue into Poonam's area of domain expertise.
Thanks. I think we have two key factors to consider for telco, right? One is the consumer base is 240 million or so, which is diverse across India. You know, you have people in metropolis, you have tier 1, tier 2 villages, you know, telco is everywhere. So the base that you address is very, very diverse. Their mobile literacy is actually varied, right? So that's challenge number one. How do you cater to everybody, you know, in such a diverse base? Second one is, how do you, and that's, you know, something that we have moved on as an organization, evolve from telco to a telco plus plus organization. What does this mean? You know, we have moved into a world where we have partnerships, and we launched music, we've launched gaming, we've launched, you know, jobs and education, we've launched movies. Now, when you offer multifold propositions like this, the interests are varied. I mean, when you talk about geo-diversification, it's not just geo-diversification, it's also about, you know, diversification in terms of personas. So everybody, you know, as an individual consumer has different interests. How do I make sure that that individual customer is getting what he or she is interested in, rather than me passing a plethora of propositions and hoping, you know, something works, right? And how do we try to, you know, make sure the diversification aspect is taken care of from our perspective is, we look at, you know, of course, geographies, regions, how do we customize messaging, you know. One of the things we did was also use language which is very, very understandable. This is an example, right? I know when we want to do our digital acquisition, we said, you know, आप SIM order करो, delivery हम कर देंगे. So it's a very relatable language. You know, when you get that message, you're like, अच्छा ठीक है, you know, I'm getting what I want. And so the vernacular in terms of understandable language, in terms of emojis that you talked about, in terms of even, you know, communication through images, communication which is focused on different regions, especially with music, it varies across the country, right? How do you send in different information notifications, or PNs as we call it, to different audiences? So we want to make sure that we cater to the diverse set of consumer base that we have. One from, of course, a telco perspective, how do we look at, you know, communicating with them in the language that they prefer, in the, you know, approach that they prefer. Second one is, how do we look at our telco plus plus propositions and make sure we give you the proposition that you're looking for and that you're interested in. I think those are our, you know, challenges on the table, and we're of course working towards enabling the ecosystem to deliver that to our consumers.
Cool. Thanks, Poonam. But to continue, let's talk a little bit more. Considering that there has been such a huge explosion, right, and the new from tier 3, 4, 5 cities, and for telco enablers such as you know, there was a whole sea change in terms of the acquisition strategy. So how has Vodafone or telco players taken this into consideration, and what has been changed in your sort of the acquisition strategy that you want to implement for this new Bharat?
Absolutely, right. I think telecom is you know, absolutely critical when we talk about digital Bharat, right? And of course there are multiple enablers, but point one, like you mentioned, the data costs are, you know, absolutely really cheap in India. The smartphone costs have come down significantly, and it's accessible to, you know, even in rural areas, tier 3, tier 4 cities, right, or towns as we call them. What are we working and looking at? We are trying to see how can we, you know, through partnerships actually drive the acquisition. What does that mean is, you know, beyond, let's say, metropolis, what might be a consumer interested in? They might be interested in learning English. They might be interested in finding jobs, you know, blue collar jobs. They might be interested in giving some of the government exams, but they don't have avenues to go for coaching, etc. So can they actually get some tutorials and, prepare for these exams? So we've got, a focused agenda on jobs and education that we launched a few months back. And that really helps you to, acquire customers for whom this is important. Right? They're getting opportunities that, maybe in, beyond tier 1 and tier 2 cities, they might not have at these opportunities, right? So that's for the, focused groups and focused audiences that we are targeting. Beyond that, we also want to look at how can we cater to the mass, which means that how can we, that's what we did. How could we introduce music, which, every day you have some time you can listen to. And like I said, it's a diverse set of, portfolio. How can you actually look at gaming, which today has a, expanding like anything. Earlier it was a hobby, now it's almost a profession for a lot of gamers. So our intent is to look at, can we bring in the right partnerships? And of course, we have our app, which becomes that centerpiece to bring in these propositions to our consumers. And we are, from an acquisition perspective, looking at how can we get our app installed, from a perspective that you have access to a plethora of propositions. Today you might want to like search for a job, it's there. In the evening you want to go and listen to music, it's there. Maybe there's a new movie that's launched or released, it's there. So that's the approach that we are taking from an acquisition perspective. Of course, the challenges are app size, like you mentioned. How do we optimize it? How do we make sure that even in areas where maybe the data speeds are not as high, how do we make sure it's available and accessible to everybody? But I think we are going leaner from app size perspective. We are working on getting more and more propositions. And that's the way we want to go and become that almost a one-stop shop for these digital services for our consumers.
Nice. And I want to continue the same question with you, Suchi, considering on the e-commerce side of things, a lot of companies also changed their strategies, right? When Bharat 2.0 exploded, when there was so much, when the digitization happened, how did you look at your acquisition strategy? Because suddenly the opportunity size had kind of doubled or trebled by then. So what is it that, what was the approach that you as an LimeRoad as an organization took?
We found two things. And of course, there are many things, but I'm just thinking of top two. Top two things that we found with this exploding accessible Bharat is that actually, oddly enough, if you are, if your per capita income, so I think if your household income is 65,000 rupees, okay, and I believe this is pre-tax. If your household income is 65,000 rupees, you are in the top, I believe, top 5 or 6 percentile in this country. It is, you can imagine this, right? That's a monthly income of 65,000 rupees. I remember speaking to this, to Siddharth Lal, who runs Royal Enfield, and he said, people who buy my bikes have a monthly income of 25,000 rupees. And 25,000 rupees is 90% of India, 90 percentile of India. It's not 90% of India, 90 percentile of India, right? Now, if you think about that per capita income, you would think that your acquisition strategy has to be sabse sasta mein bech do, right? Free and buy one, get 25, right? Buy one, get 25. Like buy one, get 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. Arey mere ko bhi le jao, paise le jao. Buy one and paise le jao, right? And you think that that is the strategy, right? But what we found is this consumer is so aspirational कि वो आ तो जाएगा एक बार. She'll come to you. But then she'll say, what the hell, what kind of quality are you giving me? Are you serious? And they will promptly also drop you. So this user we are acquiring, this Bharat user is a very, very tough user to please. They are tougher, Ritu, than you and me.
Sure.
Because their standard that they're raising the bar, yaar, saste mein do, badhiya do, and on top of that, what? You're not even trendy. I'm on Instagram, yaar. I know what Bella Hadid is wearing. And that is the user. So all of a sudden, I think in one line, Bharat has raised the bar. And it is a really, really tough bar. That's number one. And therefore, acquisition strategy for us is that now you acquire this really tough consumer. And how do you? It cannot be that simple. So that's number one. I think for us, that's really the biggest learning. The second learning is that we are in a tactile business. Tactile means people will say, Naya kya hai? Do most of you understand a bit of Hindi? Most of our research is done in Hindi, so I'm just quoting verbatim. But they say, Naya kya hai? What's new, right? And what's new? And then the next thing in my world is, kapda kaisa hai, right? So you want to touch and feel. And what we found, and we have enormous data from the US and China, and we find that the second biggest learning that will impact acquisition in a big way is that this difference between offline and online is going to fade away. So there is people are just going to move seamlessly from offline to online and online to offline. And anybody who cracks that is going to really be able to crack not just acquisition but retention. So data from the US is that in the US, in apparel and lifestyle, consumers who shop offline and online for any particular brand will buy 35% more. In China, new retail, which is what Alibaba and everybody else is calling this, right? New retail is all over the place. Like everywhere the consumer is basically in the store, placing an order online, picking up in the store. But there is even more than that. And so that's the second insight for us. So one is that Bharat consumer has just fundamentally raised the bar. The tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 consumer is a lot harder to please than the tier 1 consumer and a lot tougher. Second is that digital and physical is going to just morph into one another. And so everything we are going to do as LimeRoad is going to get reflected. So how do we do it? Number one, we focus a lot on, and we've recently done a deal with a very large established company who've had 20 years of experience in just producing high quality product at extreme value prices. So, again, think about the Bharat consumer, hard to please. How do you nail quality at that price? And second, get them. They want what Bella Hadid is wearing. And you know what? Even if they may not buy it, they want to see it. And if you're not the person who's showing it, then you're really not cool for them. And I'm telling you, they will even buy it. They will stuff it in their bags. They'll wear a salwar kameez, and then they'll go out and change, and then, and then go party, right? So that's the user. So it's reflecting in our product strategy. And then the omni-channel piece, you'll see just a phenomenal transition from LimeRoad into physical stores. So we will be sort of pretty much all over India in physical retail as well.
Thanks. I love it. Bharat has raised the bar. Let's just stay a little bit on the topic, but one important piece how we've evolved is that we are also building not just for India, but we're also building for global, right? Rashmi, I think I want to ask you, what are the new opportunities, and avenues of growth you see in terms of whether it's with innovation, that you are seeing as stemming the rise of Bharat. So what is as per you, in terms of you're a huge social media enabler in terms of as an organization, and you're helping a lot of companies, step in there. So what, according to you, are the new opportunities, and how are these global customers? You spoke about Japan. How are global consumers leveraging the Indian apps?
I want to start from India. डिजिटल भारत में जो एक अपने एक्सपीरियंस से बताती हूँ कि गूगल ने एक मेंटोरशिप प्रोग्राम स्टार्ट करा था इन कोविड. उसमें Tier 3 women participated. And these women are small business owners. From there, they want to, because they are understanding India is transforming and getting into digital. So they also want to do the same thing. So everyone can't build the website or app because they can't afford to, because building an app can cost a lot more money. But in this, we figure it out that, of course, there are a lot of websites, they can use to and build. There are WhatsApp communities. They do like a lot of business. From Tier 3, if you're making a money like even 30,000 rupees a month, it's big, So from there, we figured out that India is really adopting and they really want to transform. And they want to adopt these changes. A lot of innovations. They're figuring out, they're finding problems. For example, we don't know कि गांव में कितने सारे लोगों को they don't know how to link Aadhaar and other things, how to make a passport. Like we think like it's a small thing, for them it's a big thing. So somebody, like we helped her to build a website so that neighboring villages, people, they can register, they want to build this thing, and this company gonna help them out. So, these kind of innovations also keep coming, and that's what, in last 2-3 years, we have seen that. And then let's talk about on the other end, creators, lot of influencers. We work with lot of influencers and companies. Now, lot of companies, they start focusing on micro-influencers and vernacular influencers. If you want to reach out, like you want to sell something in Vizag, so they are looking for these kind of creators. So yes, like if you see like on company focus, because we are the in-between channel for businesses and these consumers, and trying to enable both of them. But then to connect both of them, we are, these platforms are really helping and in digital India. So that's what I'm saying. India is transforming, and Naya Bharat to Aira, and then with technology. But we also need to talk about like 5G, 3G. If you're getting like proper internet, it's easy for anyone to use it. If you want to upload something for 3 GB data, or as a company, like we are using an app which is for 5 MB. So even if they're spending 250 rupees a month and they're getting a certain data, they want to be very limited. So I think we have to create such an awesome content as a company to reach out to them, because it's a short time. Like for example, you're using Reels. People are spending 15 seconds and you have to scroll up. So build which is like good and to the context. So that's what, and a lot of innovations and everything is coming up from there, and ideas.
Poonam, you want to touch upon how is the telco piece bringing in innovation, to address global consumers?
Vodafone Idea, of course, is focused on the Indian market, but we do interact with Vodafone Group, and a lot of innovation that's happening in the telco space, right? If you want me to talk about what are our opportunities, what are our areas of focus, of course, point one is, I think, a lot of people talking about it. I'm sure that it was discussed in sessions earlier as well. 5G, right? Big opportunity space, because eventually your consumer wants to have faster speeds, download, upload, and less latency. Everything needs to be quick and seamless. There should be no buffering time, etc., right? So as a telco, and it's our role to make sure that data accessibility at the fastest speed possible is something that we are able to provide. The fact of the matter is basically a significant chunk of consumers are today still on 2G. We are talking about 5G, but there is such a huge base that is still on 2G, that's a big opportunity space for us, right? From 2G to 4G or 5G is big opportunity for us that we are looking at. And that's where we also want to make sure that innovation, yes, in terms of what are those 5G use cases, innovation in terms of how do we leverage the, the faster data speeds to give in more and more content, more and more opportunities in terms of what the consumer can access on their mobile phone is a big opportunity space. But I would also say that the underlying move from 2G to 4G or 5G itself is a big opportunity. So that is something that we as a telco player are obviously working on, right? I think there are more opportunities that we are definitely looking at. If you want me to elaborate, I would say, how do we look at hyper-personalization, right? How do we actually focus on making sure the experiences are really, really personalized to an individual consumer is, I think, a second big innovation opportunity that we are looking at. I can tell you, we as Vodafone Idea are doing it. I can tell you Vodafone Group is doing it, and we keep discussing what are those opportunities in terms of giving, even if you see something on your website or something that is shown as a plan, can you personalize it to the consumer? Can you look at what is given to that consumer in terms of what they're looking for, and hence retain loyalty? The retention fact is only if I completely buy into what you're offering to me and it fits my requirements, right? So from an innovation perspective, one is the 5G agenda, second I think is the personalization agenda. Those are for us two key big pillars that we see as opportunity. And of course, that stands for us as an Indian organization, but also that I know is a fact for the global ecosystem as well.
So I think with all of this, obviously we've seen such a huge, uptake on consumption. We are a consumption-led economy, right? And it has been predicted we'll be the third largest consumption country by 2027. So keeping all that in mind, what are you, and Suchi, for you, what are the opportunities and the tailwinds that you see, for your business, and where are you expecting the next leg of growth coming from?
I go back to this really tough consumer. You know how many of you have a personal assistant? So one out of a room full of, let's say, 150, maybe 2 or 3 of us here. Okay, by the end of, I don't know, a couple of years, everybody in that 25,000 rupee bracket will want a personal assistant. Only she'll be called Lexa Darling for fashion, right? Voice search, I think, is going to become huge. And this extremely high-barred user will want to just talk to Lexa for fashion, darling. LimeRoad will power. And you can imagine, right? She's not going to want to surf hundreds of pages of millions of products to find the one magenta kurta that's going to rock her boat. It's not going to happen. So I think voice search, right? And you already see the data. Google 2 years ago, voice search was apparently 40% of all search volume on Google. And so that's one. And you also know that this is not just because they want assistance. They're also lazy, right? Everybody is getting lazier. You just don't want to click those filters, right? I mean, there is data that says that younger children nowadays, their ability to use their forefingers because they're clicking so much is really strong, but they can't do very much more. You ask them to go down and get themselves a glass of water, they can't, and that's true of everybody. So laziness combined with this desire for, I want everything else that money can buy, but I don't want to pay for it, by the way, is going to, I think, lead to further explosion of voice search in fashion. So that's one thing that I know is going to happen, and I'm quite excited to enable it, actually. It's like Pushpa Pani Le Aao. Every one of us does it at home, right? And then, yeah, you enable it for Bharat. Give Bharat the Pushpa. So I think that's one. The second thing that I wonder, and we've talked about personalization, the LimeRoad feed, which is our front page, is personalized, right? So it changes for everybody. But I wonder if it's personalization, so either we are going to be hyper-personalized, right? And I don't think we're hyper-personalized yet in a really, really, really strong way. Or there is such degree of FOMO that people don't want to be personalized. So a lot of retailers started off by doing this thing that said, oh, the people in the south have different tastes, north have different tastes. Of course, the tastes vary. But they used to assort their merchandise and send it very, very differently. And they found that that actually didn't help sales at all. So they said, they made lots of variations to the assortment. Today, most retailers only have about 20% variation in what they send. But 80% is roughly what everybody in India sees the same thing. And I wonder, and this is a question about innovation, is does the access to so much content, media, across India, somewhere create a woman who's fundamentally homogeneous, or somewhere create a man who's fundamentally homogeneous? If you step out to tier 2, tier 3 cities today, or towns, you'll find hairstyles for men are becoming homogeneous. Everybody has one of top three hairstyles. When Amir Khan did that whole goatee thing here, like all of a sudden all of India had that goatee thing here. And then the other day we were doing research, and somebody in tier 3 said to me, Movember chal raha hai na? It took me 2 minutes to remember what Movember was, and therefore I'm growing my beard. And it's such a Western concept, and it had traveled, and he was doing his Movember beard. So the second question I have, from an innovation perspective is, are we getting a more homogenized consumer? So I think it's a high bar, tough to please Bharat consumer who I think is getting more homogenized and differentiated. So I think that's my take on the innovation areas.
Rashmi, from a social media perspective, and like I said, India is becoming a large, we are very high on consumption and we'll be one of the third largest. What is your take in terms of where do you see the opportunities and where do you see those tailwinds coming from your customers? And you're such a strong enabler in that space. So, how do you see that in terms of growth?
Last I mentioned like everyone is coming on social media. How, like 2 years back, it was picking up, but slowly. So we have seen even, I want to come back to yatra.com I mentioned. They were spending 70% of their money, marketing expenses, on print and hoardings, everything. But in last 2 years, they start spending money on social media, which is very transforming with them because now they are coming for IPO in India, which lot of gains. And that transformation they have seen. And it's not with one of the biggest player, it's with smaller players also. I want to mention one of the client, they are Apple resellers. So they have a multiple stores in India. Earlier they were doing it people come to the store and read Google reviews and they want to buy from them good offers, but they also come on social media and want to leverage that as from the competition. So even if you're doing very good business, sometimes from competition you have to break through, and this is quite helping in that branding. If we talk about tier 2 and tier 3, a lot of companies start opening shops in a mall where people visit. You go Vizag or Chhattisgarh, Raipur, people wants to hang out in a mall where you find these top brands coming up. In Decathlon, I have seen, I travel a lot, so I buy stuff. You can book from the website, you can collect it from there. So, lot of innovations are coming up, and for the age of things. Still, if you talk about 50 years old women or men, they don't want to do a simple online shop. Everyone, in tier 2 and 3 or these cities, they want to see the product. Of course, when we convince, I convinced my grandmother to shop online, but she wants to see the product. So, that customer mindset is changing, but, and it's evolving. But then with the technology and with the data, we need to grab these opportunities. In next 10 years, we're going to see new unicorns. And maybe from tier 2 and tier 3 cities also, because they're going to solve their own problems also.
Sure.
So, yeah, that's what we are seeing.
Nicely said,
Yeah.
nicely said. Poonam, from, when you look at this opportunity, and tell us about the tailwinds, because 5G is all upon us and people are actually talking about it, and everyone's waiting with bated breath. I remember, being, when we were 2G and it was voice, and then we moved to GPRS, and then came Edge, and then evolved into 4G and 3G then, and then 4G. We kept exploding as a country in terms of user base. So one is we touched upon the acquisition strategy, but also tell us about the tailwinds you see in terms of infrastructurally, and also how are you creating those tailwinds into opportunities, because I think from a network perspective, as you learn as you kind of, deploy. So if you can touch upon that.
So you're absolutely right. Telecom is a capex heavy domain, and every leap, right, from 2G to 3G, 3G to 4G, 4G to 5G has been a transformation, not just from a consumer standpoint, but from a infrastructure standpoint. You really have to revamp your infrastructure and estate and make sure that that's done across the country, because you want that accessibility of whether it's 4G, 5G, etc., to be available to everybody, right? So from that perspective, absolutely right, it's in heavy investment, and hence it is kind of a tailwind in that sense. But the point you made on how do we look at it as an opportunity, the reason it's also an opportunity is, if you ask me, it's twofold. One is, I think a lot of use cases of 5G, if you see today, are a lot more in the enterprise space than in the consumer space. Yes, of course, from a consumer standpoint, all of us want faster speeds, less latency, etc., right? But also, if you see, recently or a month back or so, there was Indian Mobile Congress, where 5G got launched. A lot of showcase was on the enterprise cases. The reason being that in enterprise business, it's got hell lot of opportunities, right? And that is easier to tackle, because you look at an enterprise, you look at what opportunity they have, you can set up an ecosystem, in that more concise space and, areas, and leverage 5G to power those enterprise use cases, right? So that's what 5G as a, opportunity, yes, but we're also looking at, how can we leverage it in the enterprise space and move faster there. Second one is, from a consumer standpoint, how do you look at those, specific cases, maybe cloud gaming, where, it's data and content heavy, and, download speeds matter. Look at those opportunities which, can really leverage the power of 5G incrementally beyond to what a 4G can offer, right? So in a normal day, I mean, I'm sure a lot of us watch, OTTs on our mobile phones. Yes, it's, of course, maybe you can always use, like I said, better, faster, but it's not anywhere, latent today in terms of speeds, etc. You're able to watch it seamlessly, right? But where do you see that real use case from a consumer standpoint? Gaming, maybe, certain specific uploads like we were talking about. So we're looking at how can we, leverage those pockets of genuine opportunities in 5G, in enterprise especially, and then, in consumer specific use cases, and see how can we take that journey forward. Like I said, of course, it's about how do you scale in incremental fashion or in a phased manner to make sure that you bring in the, 5G launch appropriately, right? But for me, I still say the opportunity is still there, significant base, almost 50% of your base is still on 2G. Even if you move them to 4G, that itself is a big win, because the use of content, the use of, information and everything that's out there, you make that shift, you get them on smartphones, that's a win in itself today.
I love the way we've kind of come together as a team in terms of you talking about the entire infrastructure that Vodafone is building for the next Bharat. You from a perspective of how social media is, it's king, right? I mean, everybody is using it, and it's such a strong sort of enabler. And Suchi, from your perspective, how is e-commerce one of the highest growth engines and verticals, for India? We've seen the explosion during COVID times when how India just picked up and New Bharat actually emerged faster on. First was the e-commerce side and then the fintech literacy education side of things. And with that, I come to my last question, which are more words of wisdom from this esteemed panel. What advice do you have, and this is more, now we come to considering it's a women's panel, what advice do you have for all the women out here who are wanting to become either entrepreneurs or, taking up key positions in leadership roles? So please, let's end this discussion on those words of wisdom from you guys. Poonam, you want to take it up?
Sure. Okay, my advice would really be have a purpose. And I genuinely believe that, right? It's important to define a purpose for yourself, and that should kind of encompass what you want to have, personal plus professional, right? I do have a purpose for myself, and I think about it in terms of, does it resonate with me, frequently every day, and does that motivate me day in, day out? I do believe that if you have a purpose and if that motivates you, wherever you want to go, personally, professionally, it will help, take you on that journey, and you're able to constantly do that checkpoint of, am I getting there? Do I need to course correct? Do I need support system to enable what I want to achieve, right? So for me, I think it's important to have a purpose, and it's individual, right? So there's no template answer, but define a purpose for yourself. Make sure that motivates you every day, and make sure that resonates with who and what you want to be. And I think that will get you there, in the course of your life and career.
Fantastic. So have a purpose.
How many women are there? So we have less than 10% women in this audience. I'm going to give you advice for everybody. Women meet me outside.
Don't worry, this is going to be telecasted as well, so the
No,
message will go out.
I think jokes aside. Look, firstly, I love that this diversity panel was not really about women. It's like, it was about geodiversity, and it's fantastic. So second thing is, I actually believe that anything I've ever learned about business or profession applies equally to men and women. I don't think there is a lot of stuff that I would say to anybody that would be different, really. And so, this is, I would think this goes for everybody. I think the one thing I would say is, I really believe this. Dare to dream. You have to dare to dream. And by dream, I literally mean you just sit and ask yourself, what do I want? And it's not about, what do I want? What is the dream? Doesn't matter how far off it is. You can always think of Elon Musk. I don't mean Twitter. But, right, you can, if you don't dare to dream, it's very hard to move enough. So I would just encourage, I'd say mandatory dreaming. Mandatory dreaming once a day with a glass of whatever you like to drink would be my one advice.
Nice.
So I follow this policy of wonder and wander. So go out and keep wondering what is happening around you. There are a lot of problems, and you can solve that. Again, world have transformed, so it's not that difficult like 20 years back of starting a business and running your business. I know customer acquisition it's a fight, but then there are a lot of ways you can do it. So wonder and wander. So that's how.
So guys, have a purpose, dare to dream, and wander and wander. And with that, it's a wrap. Thank you, ladies, for your time, and hope this was helpful.